The first time I met Jessica, she looked at me like I was an intruder in her home, which, I suppose, in her eyes, I was. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in June, and I was standing in the living room of a beautiful colonial house in suburban Boston. Mark, my boyfriend of 8 months, had finally invited me to meet his daughter. She was 16 years old, tall and slender, with her mother's dark hair and her father's green eyes. "Jessica, this is Erica," Mark said, his voice filled with nervous hope. "I've told you so much about her." Jessica barely glanced at me. "Hi," she muttered, then immediately turned to her father. "Can I go to Sarah's house now?" "Jess, come on," Mark pleaded. "I thought we could all have lunch together. Erica brought ingredients to make her famous pasta." "I'm not hungry," Jessica said coldly, already heading toward the stairs. "And I already made plans." I watched her disappear up the staircase, and my heart sank. I was 42 years old, had never been married, never had children of my own. This was all new territory for me, and I was clearly failing before I'd even begun. Mark ran his hand through his graying hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his sign of stress. "I'm sorry. She's been like this for months. Ever since her mother." He didn't need to finish. I knew the story. Mark's wife, Catherine, had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Jessica had been 14, and by all accounts, she'd been devastated. Mark had struggled to hold everything together: his grief, his daughter's pain, his demanding job as an architect. We'd met at a coffee shop near my workplace, where I worked as a pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital. He'd been struggling with his laptop, and I'd offered to help. We'd started talking, and somehow, 8 months had passed. "Give her time," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "This is hard for her." What I didn't say was that it was hard for me too. I'd spent my entire adult life focused on my career, on taking care of other people's children. The idea of becoming a stepmother terrified me, especially to a teenager who clearly didn't want me there. Over the next year, as Mark and I grew closer and he proposed, Jessica's hostility only intensified. She refused to call me by my name, referring to me as her or that woman. She skipped our engagement party. When Mark told her we were getting married, she locked herself in her room for an entire day. The wedding was small, just close friends and family at a restaurant in downtown Boston. Jessica attended, but wore black instead of the soft blue dress we'd picked out together, or rather, that I'd picked out while she sat in silence, arms crossed. She didn't smile in a single photograph. When I moved into Mark's house, our house, I kept reminding myself, Jessica made her feelings perfectly clear. "This was my mother's house," she said, watching me unpack boxes in the master bedroom. "Everything here was hers. You don't belong here." "Jessica, I know this is difficult," I started, but she cut me off. "You don't know anything about me or what I'm going through. You're just some stranger who thinks she can replace my mom." "I would never try to replace your mother," I said gently. "I just want us to find a way to be a family." She laughed bitterly. "We're not a family. We'll never be a family." Those words stung more than I wanted to admit, but I was determined to try. I made her favorite meals, only to have them pushed around her plate untouched. I asked about her school day, receiving one-word answers if I got any response at all. I bought her small gifts, a book I thought she'd like, tickets to a concert, all of which sat unopened on her desk. Mark was caught in the middle, exhausted from trying to keep the peace. "She'll come around," he kept saying. "She just needs more time." But as months passed, and Jessica turned 17, things only got worse. The night everything fell apart started like so many others, with tension simmering beneath the surface of a seemingly normal evening. It was late October, and I'd prepared dinner while Mark worked late at the office. Jessica came home from school, walked past me without a word, and went straight to her room. I heard her door slam, a sound I'd grown accustomed to. When Mark finally arrived home at 8, looking exhausted, I had the table set and dinner ready. "Jessica," I called up the stairs. "Dinner's ready." No response. "Jess, come down, please," Mark added, his voice firmer. Finally, she emerged, her face streaked with tears. My first instinct as a nurse kicked in. Something was wrong. "Honey, what happened?" Mark asked, immediately concerned. Jessica looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. "I got rejected from the art program I wanted, the one at Mom's alma mater. She would have known how to help me with my portfolio. She would have made sure I got in." The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. This was somehow my fault. "I'm so sorry, Jessica." I said softly. I know how much that program meant to you. You don't know anything, she spat. You don't know me. You don't know what I want or what I need. You're just here, taking up space in my mother's house, sleeping in her bed, trying to be something you're not. Jessica, that's enough, Mark said sharply. Erica has done nothing but try to be kind to you. Kind? Jessica's voice rose. She's trying to erase Mom. She redecorated the living room. She changed the furniture. She even threw away Mom's favorite coffee mug because it was chipped. She's erasing every trace of her. That's not true, I protested, feeling tears prick my eyes. I asked your father about every single change. I saved that mug. It's in the cabinet above the fridge. I was just worried it might break and cut someone. But Jessica wasn't listening. Years of grief and anger were pouring out, and I was the target. I wish you had never come, she sobbed, her voice breaking. I wish Dad had never met you. I wish you would just leave and let us be a family again. Everything was fine until you showed up and ruined everything. The words hit me like physical blows. Mark stood up, ready to defend me, but I held up my hand to stop him. Jessica, I said, my voice steady despite the tears now streaming down my face. I understand that you're hurting. I understand that you miss your mother, but I'm not going anywhere. I love your father, and whether you believe it or not, I care about you too. I'm here, and I'm staying. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, her face contorted with rage and grief. Then she turned and ran up the stairs. Moments later, we heard her door slam so hard that a picture fell off the hallway wall. Mark moved to follow her, but I stopped him. Let her be. She needs time to cool down. That night, lying in bed next to Mark, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Was I being selfish, staying in a situation where I clearly wasn't wanted? Was I making things worse for everyone? I'm sorry, Mark whispered in the darkness. I never wanted you to have to deal with this. It's not your fault, I replied. She's a kid who lost her mother. Her anger has to go somewhere. But deep down, I wondered how much more rejection I could take. The next morning, Jessica didn't come down for breakfast. When Mark went to check on her, he found a note on her bed. She'd left before dawn to stay at her grandmother's house, Catherine's mother, who had never quite warmed to me either. Jessica stayed at her grandmother's for 3 days. Mark was beside himself with worry, calling constantly, only to be told by Catherine's mother that Jessica needed space from the situation. The implication was clear. I was the situation. On the 4th day, Mark's phone rang at 2 a.m. I woke immediately, my nurse's instinct telling me something was wrong. What? When? I'm on my way, Mark said, already jumping out of bed and pulling on clothes. What happened? I asked, my heart racing. Jessica's in the hospital. She collapsed at Catherine's mother's house. They think it might be her appendix. I was dressed in 30 seconds. I'm coming with you. We raced to Massachusetts General Hospital, where I'd done my nursing training years ago. The emergency room was busy, but we found Catherine's mother in the waiting area, looking pale and frightened. Where is she? Mark demanded. They took her for a CT scan. The doctor thinks it's appendicitis, but they need to confirm. She looked at me briefly, then away. We waited. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor emerged. Dr. Patel, someone I actually knew from a collaborative pediatric case years ago. Mr. Harrison, your daughter does have appendicitis, and we need to operate soon. It's inflamed but hasn't ruptured yet, which is good. The surgery is routine, but there are always risks we need to discuss. As Dr. Patel explained the procedure, I saw Mark's hands shaking. He was terrified, barely processing the information. I gently took his hand and started asking the questions he couldn't, about the surgical approach, recovery time, potential complications. Dr. Patel recognized me and nodded. Erica's right to ask these questions. Jessica will be in good hands. Our pediatric surgical team is excellent. Can I see her? Mark asked. Yes, but only for a moment. We need to prep her for surgery. We went back to Jessica's room, where she lay on the gurney, pale and frightened, an IV in her arm. When she saw me, her expression hardened even through the pain. What is she doing here? She asked weakly. Jessica, not now, Mark said firmly. Erica came because she cares about you. I don't want her here. I want Grandma. The words stung, but I understood. She was scared and in pain, reverting to the familiar. I'll wait outside, I said quietly. But as I turned to leave, Jessica suddenly gasped, her face contorting in pain. The monitors started beeping urgently, and I immediately recognized the signs. Her appendix was rupturing. "Get the surgical team now," I shouted to the nurse, my training taking over. "Her appendix is rupturing." Everything happened fast. Doctors and nurses rushed in. They were wheeling Jessica toward the OR when she reached out and grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with fear. "Don't leave," she whispered. "Please don't leave." "I won't," I promised. "I'll be right here when you wake up." The surgery took longer than expected. The rupture had caused complications. Mark and I sat in the surgical waiting room for 4 hours. Catherine's mother had gone home, unable to handle the stress. Mark paced, while I held steady, using every bit of my medical knowledge to stay calm and reassure him. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, we both jumped up. The surgery went well. We cleaned out the infection from the rupture, and she should make a full recovery. She'll need to stay in the hospital for a few days on IV antibiotics, but she's going to be fine. Mark nearly collapsed with relief. I caught him and held him as he cried, all the fear and tension of the night pouring out. When we were finally allowed into recovery, Jessica was groggy but awake. She looked at both of us, her eyes confused and vulnerable. "Hey, sweetheart," Mark said softly, taking her hand. "You're okay. Everything went well." Jessica's eyes found mine. "You stayed," she whispered. "I promised I would," I replied simply. Over the next 5 days, I barely left the hospital. I used my connections to ensure Jessica had the best care, spoke with her doctors, helped manage her pain, and made sure she was comfortable. Mark had to go back to work for important meetings, but I stayed, sleeping in the chair by her bed, helping her to the bathroom, adjusting her pillows, bringing her the ice chips she craved. On the 3rd day, as I was helping her wash her face, she spoke quietly. "Why are you doing this? What do you mean?" I asked, gently wiping her forehead with a warm cloth. "I've been horrible to you. I told you I wished you'd never come. I said I hated you. Why are you here taking care of me?" I sat down on the edge of her bed and looked at her honestly. "Because you're important to the man I love. And because over this past year, even though you couldn't see it, you've become important to me too. I'm not trying to replace your mother, Jessica. No one ever could. But I'm here, and I care about you. And that's not going to change no matter how many times you push me away." Tears started rolling down Jessica's cheeks. "I miss her so much," she sobbed. "Every day, I miss her. And when Dad started dating you, it felt like he was forgetting her, like I was supposed to forget her too." I took her hand carefully, mindful of her IV. "Your father will never forget your mother. He loved her deeply, and you should never forget her either. She was your mom, and she always will be. But Jessica, she wouldn't want you to push away everyone who tries to care about you. She wouldn't want you to be alone in your grief." "How do you know what she'd want?" Jessica asked, but there was no anger in her voice anymore, just genuine curiosity. "Because I'm a mother too, in my own way. I've taken care of hundreds of children in my career, and every parent wants the same thing, for their child to be loved, to be happy, to have people who will show up for them. Your mother would want that for you too." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed my hand weakly. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for knowing what to do when my appendix ruptured. The doctor said if you hadn't caught it so quickly, it could have been much worse." "That's what I do," I said with a small smile. "I take care of people. It's not just my job, it's who I am." Jessica's recovery was slow but steady. When she finally came home, something fundamental had shifted between us. She wasn't warm or affectionate. That would come much later. But the active hostility was gone, replaced by a cautious openness. I continued to give her space while making it clear I was available if she needed anything. I'd leave snacks outside her door, help her with the homework she'd missed, drive her to follow-up appointments. Gradually, she started accepting these gestures without protest. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after she came home, I was in the kitchen making soup when Jessica came downstairs. She hesitated in the doorway, then slowly walked over. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. That night at dinner, when I said all those awful things, you said you saved my mom's coffee mug. Did you really?" I reached up to the cabinet above the fridge and pulled out the chipped blue mug with "World's Best Mom" written on it. Jessica's hands trembled as she took it from me. "I would never throw this away," I said gently. "This mug represents something precious, your mother's love for you. Why would I want to erase that?" Jessica clutched the mug to her chest, tears streaming down her face. I was so sure you were trying to erase her. That's what Grandma kept saying. Your grandmother is grieving too, I said carefully. Sometimes grief makes us see things that aren't there. But Jessica, I need you to understand something. Your mother's place in this family, in your heart, in your father's heart, that's sacred. I'm not here to take her place. I'm here to add to this family, not subtract from it. Over the following months, Jessica and I found our rhythm. She started joining us for family dinners more often. She'd tell me about her day at school sometimes. When she received an acceptance letter from a different art program, she showed it to me first, seeking my reaction before telling her father. For her 18th birthday in March, I did something I'd been planning for months. I'd reached out to Catherine's old friends, collected photographs and stories, and created a beautiful memory book about her mother. Jessica opened it at her birthday dinner and immediately started crying. She couldn't finish the sentence, just kept turning pages, looking at photos of her mother she'd never seen before, reading stories from people who'd loved her. I wanted you to have something that celebrated your mom, I explained. Something that showed you that remembering her, honoring her, that's not just okay. It's important. She was an incredible woman who raised an incredible daughter. Jessica stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me for the first time. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for understanding. That summer, Jessica asked if I'd go with her to visit her mother's grave. It was the first time I'd been invited to something so personal. We brought flowers, sunflowers, Catherine's favorite, and Jessica talked to her mother, told her about the art program she'd be starting in the fall, about how scared she was to leave home. I wish you could meet Erica, Mom, Jessica said, her hand in mine. Really meet her. Not just, I think you'd like her. She's been good to Dad, and she's been patient with me, even when I didn't deserve it. She stayed when I told her to leave. She stayed when no one else did. I squeezed her hand, too emotional to speak. As Jessica prepared to leave for art school in September, our relationship continued to evolve. She started calling me by my name without that edge of resentment. She'd text me photos from her campus visits. She even asked for my advice on her portfolio. The night before she left for college, she knocked on my bedroom door. Mark had already gone to bed, exhausted from helping her pack all day. Can we talk? She asked. We went downstairs and sat in the living room, the room I'd redecorated, which had been such a point of contention. But I'd kept Catherine's favorite painting above the fireplace, and Jessica's baby photos still lined the mantel. I need to apologize, Jessica said. Really apologize, not just for that one night, but for the whole first year. I was cruel to you. I said unforgivable things. You were grieving, I said. You were a kid who lost her mother. There's nothing to forgive. There is, though, she insisted, because you're right. My mom wouldn't have wanted me to treat you that way. She would have wanted me to give you a chance. And I didn't, not for a long time. But Erica, when I was in that hospital, scared and in pain, you showed up. You stayed. You took care of me like I mattered to you. And I realized that you weren't trying to replace my mom. You were just trying to love me in your own way. You do matter to me, I said, tears streaming down my face. More than I ever expected. You're sharp and talented and so much stronger than you know. Jessica wiped her eyes. I know I'm going away to school, and things might be different, but I want you to know that I'm glad Dad found you. I'm glad you stayed. You're not my mom. Nobody will ever be my mom but her. But you're Erica, and that's important too. Your family. The word family hung in the air between us, and I realized that this was what I'd been hoping for all along. Not to replace Catherine, not to be called Mom, just to be accepted as part of their lives. You're family to me too, I said, pulling her into a hug. The next morning, we drove Jessica to college, her car packed with art supplies, clothes, and hope for the future. As we helped her move into her dorm room, I noticed she'd brought the memory book I'd made, along with a framed photo of Catherine. But next to it, she placed a photo from her birthday, the three of us together, looking like what we were, an imperfect, blended family that had fought hard to find our way to each other. As Mark and I drove home, his hand in mine, I thought about that terrible night when Jessica had sobbed that she wished I'd never come. I thought about how many times I'd wanted to give up, to walk away from the pain and rejection, but I'd stayed. And in staying, in showing up day after day, even when it was hard, even when I wasn't wanted, I'd helped build something precious. I wasn't Jessica's mother. I would never be Catherine. But I was Erica, the woman who stayed when staying was hard, who loved when love wasn't returned, who believed in the possibility of family, even when it seemed impossible. And that, I realized, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Jessica called that night to tell us she'd made it through her first day. Before hanging up, she said something that made my heart soar. "Love you both. Thanks for everything, Erica. Really." Mark looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You did it," he whispered. "You never gave up on her." "On us," I corrected. "I never gave up on us. Because that's what family is. Not perfect, not easy, but worth fighting for. Worth staying for. Worth everything."